All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Drummond from Vinton PD in Virginia. He has 19 years experience in law enforcement. I'm really excited to have him as our guest on today's episode. Welcome, Chief Drummond. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I am really excited. For anyone who's listening, we had an offline conversation and we talked for a while. I feel like the conversation was really flowing, so I'm really excited to share your perspectives and your insights in the wellness space. But I would first love if you could give us a little bit of background on you.
Of course, I was born in Brazil, born in it's about 40 minutes from Rio. Came to the United States in 1989. Family first went to Miami, and then my dad decided that we would move to Massachusetts and really immerse in the culture. And from 8 years old or 7 years old in 1989. My dad put me in American schools. I didn't know a lick of English and kind of just figured it out from there. So right from the beginning, it was a tough transition, but really immersed into American culture. Um, from 1989 on, I stayed in Massachusetts, went to high school there, and really had a DARE program. That's how my first exposure to law enforcement came in, was DARE program was very big in Massachusetts. And an officer would come and talk about obviously staying away from drugs was the big component of DARE and fell in love with the law enforcement profession, right? As kids, we naturally fall in love with the uniform, the sense of purpose that law enforcement has, the heroism behind it. It's a real clear and easy role that really kids identify with. And that was me in the beginning, really fell in love with it. And continued talking to these officers for years as a kid. And as I continued to get older, of course, I had aspirations to join the military. My dad moved us to this country so we can achieve the American dream and go to college and do big things, and which I did later in life, but I really wanted to go hard into the military, wanted to join the Marine Corps, and which I did, graduated high school, went into the Marine Corps. And when I went in, it was a very busy time in the Marines. So this is 2002, and we're very active globally. So I got deployed quite a bit, got to experience quite a bit, met a lot of wonderful people. And of course, debating whether to stay in the Marine Corps, do my 20 years and do other assignments in the Marine Corps or transition to get out. Really, the defining factor for me in the Marine Corps and staying in the military was all the hardships I was putting my family through, deploying, and some of the nervousness. And of course, going to Iraq, Afghanistan, and all these areas. I was putting my parents through a lot. And really, my deciding factor to leave the Marine Corps was my family. I just saw the stress that I was putting them through, and there was other things I wanted to do in life as well. So I decided to get out, went back to Massachusetts, and went hard into law enforcement. There was two transition points. I had an ambition to be a pilot, so I had applications to go to flight school to go be a pilot, and I also had applications to be a police officer. So I was really in a 50-50 of which one I wanted to go. These are two career fields that I really loved as a kid. And an agency in Virginia came calling and invited me to test with them. And of course, I jumped on that opportunity back then, tested, was successful, and started my law enforcement career in 2006 here in Southwest Virginia. Moved down here, not knowing anybody, not knowing anything. I'm not from the area. My family's not here. And really just took the career in stride and learned as much as I can, where I ultimately ended up in Vinton, which Vinton from my other agency is a much smaller community, a tight-knit community. And that's really what I was trying to capture is sort of being a well-rounded police officer where I got to obviously answer my calls for service, refine my skills, and have time to sort of get to know the community, serve them, get to let them know who I am. And I've been here ever since in Vinton. But yeah, just a Brazilian kid, went to Massachusetts and ultimately ended up in Virginia, and here I am today.
I love your backstory. I couldn't even imagine what it's like growing up as a young kid coming to a whole new country, not knowing English and having to learn and adapt. But the one thing that stuck out to me, and I say this a lot because I truly believe it, that you never know the impact you can have on someone's life. And, for you to be put in the DARE program or to have your first experience with law enforcement, to be the individual who was, coming and speaking about, staying off of drugs and you being like, wow, like that's something I might want to do someday. Like that's something that's inspiring to me, I think is incredible. And I think sometimes you may not even ever know. Like the people who touch your lives, like they might not know that they jump started that interest for you, and they may never know. And we may never know the impact that we have on people. But I love that story of you being like, huh, like that's something that's aspirational. It's something that I might be interested in being someday.
Yeah, this is just an officer, assigned to the DARE program, assigned to my elementary school, and me probably not knowing a whole lot of English still had a monumental impact on me. Just, command presence is always a big thing, and just how he carried himself. I remember vividly him coming to visit and talking, and I imagine I captured quite a bit of what he was saying and not knowing a lot what he was saying because I was still learning the English language, but it
Yeah.
was enough for me to understand the role of law enforcement in this country and that I wanted to be a part of it. And yeah, what you mentioned, you just never know, how you're going to touch somebody's life. Like this officer back then touched mine. And still today, I still remember the story quite vividly. We as chiefs or even as supervisors constantly tell younger officers, you never know who you're going to impact, and sometimes you won't know. In this case, I'm kind of a living point of it that somebody will impact your life and completely transition your career into something.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, you know, for me growing up, I never had a lot of really positive mentors or people to look up to that inspired me. And I always wish that I had that. And so to be in a position where you have that opportunity to inspire other people and to give them not only hope, but also to let them know that they can be the best version of themselves. Like they can be, like you said, that American dream, or that you can be whatever you want to be, and to be that inspiration for others, I think is incredible. And it's something I think to remember, anyone who's listening to this, who, even if you are an officer and you're not in leadership, you still have that capability and that power to impact people's lives in such a positive way.
I agree 100%. Children are naturally empathetic. So, they want to feel useful and needed and appreciated. And when you see these figures come into your life, like a police officer in mine, and pay attention to you, and you see this sort of position that he holds in the community or in society, you emulate that and you want to be a part of that. Most kids that I know or at least grew up with, they're always connected to some sort of service-oriented career field that they want to do, whether it's being a trash man, fireman, police officer. They all want to do these jobs that impact others.
Yeah.
And that was not a special case. I wanted to do the same thing.
And you did it.
Yes,
I
we did it.
so kind of to recap, you got into the military, you decided to get out because of your family. You had this kind of 50-50 shot to be a pilot or to go into law enforcement. You ended up in law enforcement, and you became a chief really young. How
Yeah.
old were you when you became a chief?
I was 38 or yeah, I was 38 because in December I turned 38. So it was right at my birthday I became the chief of the Vinton Police Department. And it was a tough transition, as we mentioned in a little bit of the phone call. This was during the pandemic, so you had to learn how to navigate those waters as a law enforcement agency that has contact with everybody
Mhm.
in a time where contact is being limited, and also trying to learn how to be a chief. So, I took it very humbly, but also kind of what I mentioned, drinking from the fire hose as information is coming at you, you're having to make decisions and having to still be accountable to your team, your department, your community. So it was a great transition. Probably wouldn't have picked it again, but nevertheless, it was still a transition. And I think, you only learn from your challenges. So this was definitely one of them for me.
I love that you said that, because I wholeheartedly agree that there have been so many things that I have that same attitude of like, man, that was really hard. And I don't know if I would have like knowingly done that again, but it has been the best growing opportunity ever. And I think that you arguably learn more from the challenges than you do when things are easy.
I've definitely learned over my years, my 43 years on this earth that, trying to live through comfort, you're never really going to excel. Comfort gives you that comfort. It's the challenging moments that you really learn from, and you sort of have to self-reflect and learn how to either continue doing it that way or take a hard left or right and kind of adjust to it. But it's always been the trying moments in my life that have sort of really taken shape and made me a bigger person, a better leader or a better servant to my community.
Yeah, and I'm a I'm actually a fan of discomfort now. I kind of welcome it. Even though it's not fun, I think that for me, like I don't want to stay the same. Like I don't I hope that throughout the rest of my life I'm always growing and learning. And I think that discomfort is a sign of growth. It's an indication that you are, stepping into a better version of yourself. And so even though I mean, it's uncomfortable, obviously discomfort, uncomfortable. But I actually really enjoy it now.
Yep.
I won't say that that was the case always, like when I was younger. But now as I get older, I think that I encourage that. I want that. I want to feel like I'm evolving.
And that's it. I mean, it's constant repetition of trying to get better and improving and course correct when things are wrong. You know, repetition is certainly the architect of achievement. So when you're constantly trying to do something, you always have to be consistent and of course reevaluate your decisions and grow from that. And similar to you, I think I secretly enjoy discomfort because that's where I seem to shine the most is when I'm trying different things, especially when you excel, you know, when the cash and prizes come in because of the good decisions that you made. That's all wonderful. But when you can really self-reflect and evaluate yourself when things didn't go your way and grow from that, that's where, you know, big change comes.
100%. And I would love if you could share a little bit more about, um, that I know you said that transition was challenged, but how did that impact your health, your physical and mental health during that time?
My transition as a chief.
Yeah, and just that challenging time of,
It
it's
was,
drinking out of a water hose, it's
yeah.
pandemic.
It was tough, because not only were you going through all that, but I think nationally a lot of us were going through recruiting challenges as well and personnel. So you're, you know, as a chief, you're very worried about the care of your personnel, right? Troop welfare. So you're focusing on that. You're trying to focus on being a good chief and learn your job and do it well and excel. So a lot of it really was, you know, a lot of people saying balancing your work and life balances. I think really it's just work and life consequences is you're going to focus on your work life or your personal life, and there's always going to be consequences to it, and you have to figure out which consequences either going to make it or break it in your position. In my case, you know, I was spending a lot of hours at the police department, a lot of hours trying to learn and trying to, you know, recruit talent and make great decisions. But at the same token, my personal life was suffering because I was spending an abnormal amount of time at the police department. So it's a lot of conversations that you have to have with your loved one, family, kids, why, in my case, my wife, about what I'm trying to achieve professionally and why things may be falling apart as far as like not being able to make it to certain events, family events, and obligations on the personal aspect because I think everybody that's listening would agree that law enforcement has a knack to really absorb your time and take up a whole lot of it, especially in the weekends, holidays is really when things count on night shifts or being called out at night. And you really kind of have to take that with stride and readjust to it. It's a constant struggle. I don't think it ever really ends. I think it's something that you continuously work on and you sort of balance out professionally.
Yeah, and I like that you said it's like it is this balance, but it's also like how can you, because it's never going to be even, right? It's like there's always going to be times where it's like up and down. And so, how can you prioritize certain things at certain times in your life to make sure that it all doesn't come falling down?
Yeah, it's priorities. And you have to, you know, it's the key to everything is communication. And sometimes, of course, communication breaks down. It's communicating well with your police department, with your chain of command, or communicating things with your loved ones about where you're at in life, what your priorities are. More than likely, people are going to support you whichever way you're going to go. But if you don't communicate what's going on in your life and you kind of keep it all inside, no one can help you. No one knows what you're going through. So, and that was tough for me is I maybe as a man or maybe as a chief is communicating things that are going on and what you're tackling, what priorities you have. I found it much easier, I think maybe with age that as the more I open up, the easier things are for me.
Well, and
Because
I think,
people are very understanding and they want to see you succeed and excel.
yeah, and I think I mean, it's hard to put yourself out there. I just think as a human being, to
Mhm.
put those walls down and to communicate what's going on. But I also think that, in the conversations that I have with other leaders like yourself, it's like, you have such a servant mindset of like, how can I take care of everybody else around me, that oftentimes the focus that should be on yourself isn't there because you're so focused on your agency, your family. And then it's like you look at yourself and you're like, oh no, like I haven't really been prioritizing myself and my wellness. And I know that when we talked offline, you kind of had that moment where you were, really active and, physically fit throughout your career. And then there was kind of a moment where you stopped and you're like, oh, I've let things slip a little bit. Can you maybe explain how that happened and what, like, where that like wake up call was for you, and then how you got back on track?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I think a lot of us, probably everyone does that, right? You put the priorities on building others and making things better, whether it's in your family or whether it's in your professional life, and you're sort of sacrificing, right? You're helping everybody, and before you know it, things got out of hand, and you haven't been helping yourself. And you have to take care of number one. If you're going to help others, you got to take care of yourself. It's sort of like the airplane analogy, right? If the gas mask the
Oxygen
oxygen
mask, yeah.
mask comes down, you got to put it in your own. You got to put your own first before you help others. And that's tough to do. Easy said, but sometimes we forget about that. So I've been really focusing on working on myself. And really what it came down to is when I was on the patrol shift, of course, as a younger guy, you're a little bit more resilient when it comes to health. I think everybody at a younger age, you think you're going to live to be 100 years old. And I can assure you, there's a lot of people in the cemetery that probably thought the same thing and they thought they had more time. And as you get older, you kind of figure out that there is a mortality to this thing, and you start working on yourself. For me, it was quite simple. Really, is sort of looking in the mirror and seeing, wow, I've really let myself go. I really haven't been dialing in on my fitness or really just quality of life, like breaking down that house back to the studs and working on some of your pillars, meaning your mental health, your financial health, your physical health, and of course your social or spiritual health. And that's really what I started focusing on when I became a deputy chief and an administrative officer, was that I really need to work on myself. That way I can be a better version of myself to others. Because I'm not going to be a good example, a good role model if I'm just preaching something that I'm actually not doing on my own. And that's really where things started taking shape for me, was when I became a deputy chief and really knew that I had some level of influence now, being an administrative officer, and the direction of the department and direction of the troop welfare of my people sort of relied on sort of my guidance, and I had to be that example for it.
And I honestly think that, and as you're talking about it, I'm like, I think that's the definition of being that servant leader or,
Mhm.
wanting to help others is like, if you aren't the best version of yourself, then you can't be there for your team or your family in the way that you want to be. So it's almost like this reverse mindset that has to happen because I think that, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like I don't prioritize myself or my time in the best way that I can. And then I start to notice what that does. I'm not as sharp. I'm maybe a little bit grumpier. Like I'm not really, the best that I can be. And you start to notice that. And I think that if you do want to be there for others, whether that's your family or your community or your peers or your team, that you do have to take that step back and say, okay, how can I start with myself first? I know that you said that you kind of fell off a little bit. You had that like wake up call of like, man, I've let it slip. What are some of the things that you started to do to get back to a level where you felt like you were, at kind of that optimal?
For me, it's, my personality is going hard in the paint, full gas, just really, like I mentioned, breaking down that house back to the studs and getting back to the basics. My first priority, of course, like anybody else's, is your physical fitness. I think once you get your physical fitness dialed in, everything else seems to fall in place, meaning confidence, the way you look about yourself and feel about yourself, and you can start working on other avenues. So I actually started my fitness journey, like I mentioned, going hard. So I went with the 75 hard challenge, which I had failed numerous times. Kind of a hard transition to start into, but like I said, that's part of the personality. So I started dialing in my macros, right? Figuring out what my protein, carbs, and fat intakes is for the day, tracking my food, tracking my sleeping. Sleeping is such a huge component. That's your number one. is getting enough sleep. And like I mentioned, when you're burning it at both ends in law enforcement, trying to be a great police officer, a great chief, and be an awesome husband or family member, you're going to burn it at both ends. So you got to figure out at what point you're going to get some sleep and quality sleep, of course. So I really started dialing in with my sleep. Of course, not eating so much processed foods, not eating that quick food, that comfort food, and not living a life where it's sort of self-serving and having some level of self-awareness of what I'm consuming. Because as we know in this business, we get busy and we want to eat very quickly and continue with our work, and you kind of pay the price for that as you get older. So in my case, I really started, packing my own meals or at least monitoring what I was eating, cutting down my meals at specific times. And it's worked out well. It's still a work in progress, of course. I think it's a lifelong journey as far as your physical fitness goes, but I haven't let off the gas yet. Since that, I've really become competitive as far as, doing races, doing Spartan, doing some fitness competitions, partnering up with local organizations here and trying to push wellness into the community as well, just outside of the walls of the police department, and really trying to promote this thing from both within and outside.
I love the personality of like I just go like full speed,
Yeah.
like
Full
pedal
gas. I
down.
mean, sometimes that can be self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
Sometimes you bite off more than you can chew. As long as you can reset, my adage is if you're doing 80% well, and 20% is you're having your cheat meals and all that, you're doing relatively well. I think if you want to do it 100% and always be on a diet and try to get lean and mean, and you never really give yourself a break, I think that's a recipe for disaster. So there's got to be some room in there for you to have some fun with your family and
Yeah.
and eat some of those foods. But 80% of the time, stay dialed in and stay in your fitness routines, and kind of stay locked in.
Well, I think too, like as a reminder, it's like, what's the ultimate goal? And I talk about this a lot of, identifying why is it important for you to do those things. I think that if you don't have a deeper reason why you're doing it, it's hard to sustain that and to keep that momentum. But if you wake up every day and you're like, okay, I'm doing this because XYZ, and that is going to look different for everybody. Some people are really going to wake up and say, hey, I want to perform my best on the job. And I
Mhm.
want to have, that elite level out on the streets. Or some people are going to say, "Hey, I really want to like be there for my family. I want to be able to like run and play with my kids. Like I want to be around to see my grandkids one day. Like that's my why." And then other people are like, "I just want to have a long retirement. I don't want to, become that statistic where I retire at, you know, what was it, 54, 50,
Mhm.
and then die 4 years later." So I think if you have that, like, hey, this is my why, then that becomes your motivation to get up and do the thing. But if you're like, I'm just doing it just to do it or because someone else is telling me to do it, I think that's when it becomes a little unsustainable. You have to really have a deeper reason to have that dedication to it.
It's certainly, and you brought up a great point as far as statistically in law enforcement. We don't run the best stats with our our lifelong, living long really is what it is. I think I'm trying to remember it. 70% of our mortality is attributed to some sort of heart disease or heart attack. That's
Yep.
an alarming number in law enforcement, 70%. And I think 10% of that included in the 70 or plus that is suicide, and the other 10 is mental health. So you're looking at some real hard numbers in law enforcement where folks are tending to show some level of heart problems at 57 years old, if not some critical problems. And what I try to tell the department, of course, and some of my peers and loved ones is one way or another, your health is going to be a priority to you, whether you start early and try to be preventative, or when disaster strikes is when things tend to get serious for us, is we're trying to get on the front end and try to tackle it early on so we can kind of beat those metrics and live beyond 57 and combat things like heart disease and suicide, PTSD. And that's where a good, robust wellness program with good buy-in can help out with that.
Yeah, 100%. And, there's a lot of things that contribute to that. And I think people maybe don't look at the full picture. And nutrition is going to be one of them. Stress, of course, especially cumulative chronic stress. But sedentary lifestyle also
Nope.
contributes to that. It actually increases your risk of heart disease by like 25% if you sit all day. And so it just goes back to what we said about prioritizing your wellness, try to get in front of it. I know that you take a proactive approach, and I would love to hear how that mentality has translated into the things that you're doing organizationally.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I mean, a lot of us, our primary purpose is to sit in a police car, answer your calls for service, be proactive, and be great stewards of the community. But a lot of it tends to be a sitting down function where you're sitting in a car and then something happens in law enforcement, you get a hot call and you go from 0 to 100 very quickly. That's not exactly a good thing for your body to go from that point. When you look at it from an athlete standpoint, a fighter in the UFC, they'll train for that fight and they'll warm up, they'll practice, and then they go into the fight. Where we'll go from 0 driving around, and then you get that hot call, and your endorphins and everything is just skyrocketing, and you're battling internally with that, and of course, in trying to remain composure with that call for service, and that has some detrimental effects to your body. You might not notice it now, but you'll certainly notice it years to come as more and more of those exposures come into play. And those are sort of the hidden marks of in law enforcement that you don't see is that damage that's done internally to you from your body going from 0 to 100 constantly over a 20, 25 year career. And the goal for us is to identify those, understand that that's occurring, that's going to occur, that's the nature of the job, and how can we capture that and mitigate it by establishing and allowing officers to work out on duty, having nutritional classes to find out, what should I eat? What can I eat? What's better for me? Getting those checkups, those yearly checkups, whether it's your physical, getting your testosterone check if you're a man. We want to go full force as far as really capturing wellness for the police officers and really dial them in and sort of get a full scope of what the job can do to your body and how you can prevent it.
Yeah, and I love that you're trying to get on the front end of things because I think that proactive wellness is the hardest thing to do. I
Mhm.
do think that everyone who's listening, we've all been in that position where you didn't really think about it until you had to think about it and something popped up, right? Like you start having issues, you have an injury, whatever that is, and now you're trying to figure it out. And to your point, it's like it's not if, it's when. And so how can we try to get on the front end of it and proactively prioritize those things? And I know when we talked offline, you do a lot of really great things with, like you said, education, but also how can you implement and integrate these things consistently throughout your agency? Can you give a little bit of insight into the four pillars or the four, I think you said tenants?
Tenants?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
So really, for us, I think with any agency, you're going to be challenged budget wise. I'd love to hire a full-time nutritionist and physical fitness coach to come in 7 days a week and teach these officers. It's very unrealistic because of the expense. And I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out how can I implement and how can I be effective. And really, it came to me just out of a whim that I had the talent already here. I had the personnel already here that had that acumen that I could capture and teach. So going back to your question, yeah, our wellness-based program will be based on four tenets, which is physical, financial, spiritual, social, meaning mental health as well, because understanding human beings we're social creatures and we have to interact with each other. We're tribal. So we want to capture that as well. In the physical field, we are training two of our personnel, three potentially, in physical fitness, nutrition to be our full-time coaches here. So I want to give access to all of our employees, the whole local government organization, to these two where they can sit down with them, create a plan, create a physical fitness plan, create a nutritional plan, and sort of a blueprint on how they can capture physical wellness. Financial wellness, of course, we can partner up with our financial department where we have a good amount of talent there that can teach officers, especially the young ones, on how money management really. I know you've mentioned it in the past about, the adage with police officers is you're going to get a job, you're going to get paid relatively well, but still in the lower in the spectrum, and you're going to go buy that brand new truck and already put yourself in the hole. So
Yeah.
we want to get ahead of that and sort of have financial classes on how to make your money work for you and how to invest appropriately so you can have that long, successful retirement and not have to worry about the money. And these are things that didn't happen when I was younger. We didn't have those classes, just sort of self-taught. So I really want to capture that with existing officers and the ones onboarding on how to make that money work for you and how to not be so much of a consumer and more of a producer in society. Spiritual, of course, is really important. It doesn't matter where you align spiritually, but we want to capture it through external sort resources that we have here in Southwest Virginia. We have quite a bit of talent that can come into our police department to talk to officers because if you're a human being on this earth, you're going to have problems and challenges. And it's important for you to communicate with an external person and sort of iron that out and sort of help you navigate those waters because sometimes you can't tackle these problems alone and it's better for you to communicate with others. So we have resources that can come into the department, whether it's tragedy that you've dealt with personally, obstacles, divorces, addictions, or even the calls for services that we have that might cause trauma to you. And we have these folks come in that can do debriefs and talk to you and offer resources. So it's extremely important. Mental health for Virginia is big. It's big nationally. We've partnered with hospitals here where we can have access to hospitals and mental health clinicians. We have programs put in place, of course, the standard EAP program, but we also have private companies that are willing to step up and give officers resources for potential for just R&R, just rest and relaxations, all expenses paid for them to go somewhere and disconnect and just be a better version of themselves and kind of disconnect from the job, focus on them and their families, and then come back to work when they're needed. My position is I think if we can capture these things and tackle these problems head on early, that will create some really resilient officers. Of course, with any program, you sort of have to have buy-in and influence, and it's always better when your chief law enforcement officer and some of your staff are doing it with you as well. So buy-in is important because everybody else sees the success of the program.
Yeah, 100%. And the one thing that I wrote down that I was like, yes, like the one word is effective.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of times we forget about that. And I say this all the time, like, if no one is using my program, it's not benefiting anybody. And if we start asking people, like, is this working for you? And they're saying no, then it's not a success, right? So, like, I think having that word of like, how can we implement things, but how can we implement things that are effective? Like, that's the word, that's the key word there. And I'm glad that you said that because sometimes I think that, um, things take time and effort and, it's hard to get things off the ground. But I think that sometimes there's box checking that happens of like, okay, let's just do this. But it's like, is it actually helping? And I think that's the question. Is it effective?
100%. And that happens in law enforcement. We'll create programs and sometimes it's not effective and you need to take a hard look at the program or you as the chief, you need to either scrap it, readjust, course correct. And that's really just trial and error because we are in the people business and people respond differently to many things. And so you can try different things, but you also have to have the ability to change up if it's not being effective enough or if people aren't just responsive to it. And these topics, they're quite intimate. Your physical fitness is intimate, your financial, your spiritual, and even your mental health. These can be very private moments and it's very tough to capture. But I think we have an inherent responsibility, especially me as the chief, to really take care of my people because, as a chief, it's really easy to say my responsibilities are to the community, which it is. But really, my responsibilities are to the men and women of the Benton Police Department, and their responsibilities is to the community. So I try to focus all my attention on creating a resilient staff, and in return, of course, they'll be resilient to the community. And it's a constant reevaluating of programs to see if things are actually that are implemented are actually going to work. A lot of trial and error for sure. And you as a chief, you kind of have to accept that and tell your staff, yeah, that wasn't really a great program. Let's try something else or get feedback from them.
Would you maybe argue, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about like learning from things that maybe didn't work out? Like, would you say that it's worthwhile to try things and have like, the the confidence to fail if it does fail, and but at least you're trying. Like, would you argue that you've learned from some of those things?
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing I'm not weak in is confidence. I'm very confident in trying different things, but I'm also very quick to take accountability of things that fail.
Yeah.
Sometimes not even to my own programs, but you being the chief, you sort of take that initiative and say, yeah, no, we can change course on that. We've tried different things where really even in the inception phase of creating a wellness program that we'll try to, have a bright idea of a program. Maybe it's a app that we can use for mental health. And you think it's a great idea initially, but then you sort of start self-reflecting on it. Is like, is this even going to work? Are people actually going to engage with some external person that's not really tied in emotionally to you? So it's like you mentioned, it's trial and error, and all you can do is expose yourself, be vulnerable to these changes, and hopefully that you have a responsive agency that's gonna use these tools that you're providing. If not, scrap it, try something different. Don't keep trying to force that puzzle piece where it doesn't fit.
Yeah, I love that you're not afraid to try and that you're willing to see like what works. You said the word resilient a few times, creating a resilient staff, having more resiliency in this career. What do you think is resilience? Like, what does that word mean to you?
I think as you're maturing, as you're growing older, as you're trying to transition, like in my case, I try to transition my fitness and everything else. Your new life that you're trying to reestablish is going to cost you your old one, meaning you have to scrap all your bad habits and create that new resilient you. And hopefully that people are seeing it. In my case, I'm very open with what I'm doing, how I'm tackling my fitness, where I am with my spiritual growth, financial. So I try to really be an advocate for it and also communicate it to everybody that's willing to listen, of my challenges, and sort of put a human aspect to it, that it's okay to try to change. It's okay to even fail as long as you understand the failures and adjust to it. One component in law enforcement that's always tough is, well, really, it's not really law enforcement. It's just a human aspect that we hate change. And I think we hate change because we hate to be wrong or we hate to fail. Um, but like you mentioned earlier, and I mentioned, with change comes growth, comes resiliency, and comes your lessons learned, and that's where you become the better you.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I really do think that resiliency is the opportunity to learn from things and to grow in spite of or because of those things. And it's not always the easiest. I think that it's easy to avoid and escape and numb and shove things down and not really deal with it. Um, but to me, and I've been there, to your point of like being vulnerable and communicating with people and saying, hey, like I get it. Like I've been there, I've done that. I've done all of it. I've done, unhealthy coping mechanisms and I've avoided and um, I thought that to me in that moment, I thought that was resiliency. If I could say, hey, this isn't affecting me, I'm good. I thought that that
Mhm.
meant that I was resilient and that I was strong. And it came with time to realize that that was my weakness. My weakness was not dealing with the things and not growing and avoiding it and numbing because that was easy. Like that was way easier than like looking at myself and saying, okay, like these are the things that need to be addressed. Like these are the things that I'm not doing right. These are the things where like I need to learn and to grow. That was the hard work. And to me, that's what that resiliency is like, how can you take a look at your life and your choices and realize that you're always going to want to take the easy way out. You're never going to want to face your things head on because it's hard. But if you can and you can face them and you can start making different, more positive choices and you can learn and you can grow from those things, it's the hard work that creates the resiliency.
Yeah, your brain is set up to protect you, right? To not want you to try those difficult tasks. It's meant to protect you and keep you safe. And you have to go everything against what you're feeling to try those new things, to expose yourself or to put yourself out there and and be successful to that change, but also potentially a negative a negative interaction or a negative outcome, and sort of understand, oh yeah, that kind of sucked. Let's change course here. But that's where most of my growth comes from.
Have you heard the expression, the only way out is through?
No, I have never heard that. I'm gonna write it down though.
I think about that. It's like the only way to get to the other side is to go through. Like that's the only way out. So,
Well, that's
sometimes
I
you have to
forget. It's
charge.
like the buffalo and the cow story as far as weathering moments. It's sort of a metaphor where I'm trying to remember it. It's when facing a storm, cows will typically run away, and what happens is they prolong the time in that storm, whereas a buffalo will hit it head on and push through it and weather the storm, which is much quicker, whereas the cow will sort of just sit there and get blasted by the storm. But that reminds me of that story.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I love that. You got to charge through it sometimes, like head
That's
on.
it. That's
Um,
it.
I wanted to ask you, because this is something I think is a challenge everywhere, but how do you build a culture where people want to prioritize their wellness? They want to be physically, mentally fit. They want to be financially stable. Like, how do you create a culture where people want that?
Start at the top, right? You're a chief law enforcement officer. If you're just creating policies and you expect other people to follow, you got to be the number one. You got to take the lead, right? Sort of be able to charge that gun bunker like the military with your troops. So in my case is if you're going to establish policies, make sure that you're participating with it and meeting those standards yourself because people are watching you do it as well or not do it in some cases. And that's where I think the buy-in comes in is if you're willing to do the things that you're saying they should do as well. Um, and a lot of it is really just showing up. I know 90% of success is just showing up, but it's that other 10% where the magic happens, where you go above and beyond the standard and you're sort of there with your troops, with your law enforcement officers, doing the PT with them, going to the calls for service with them, talking about their financial wellness, the spiritual parts is connecting with people. And of course, as a chief, you want your administrative staff to do the same thing. Creating culture is just that. Everybody has to have a buy-in. And often than not, when I was a younger guy, I was always looking to the top to see if they're doing it as well. Because if they believe in their own systems, then I'm more willing to try it.
Yeah. Like your actions are
Yep.
matching your policies or the things that you're implementing. I've never heard the 10% is where the magic happens.
Hmm.
That little extra effort. I really like that. I actually wrote that down because I think that that's inspiring to say like, yes, it is important to show up, but like, how can you go above and beyond just showing up?
Well, and that's it. A lot of people say, showing up is half the battle, and that's true, but it's going to take a little bit further for you to really see that magic happen. And that's where kind of we're at is, yeah, show up and try to do better and try to dial it in, but let's keep moving that ball forward. Let's keep trying to progress and not just stay stagnant and everything is just okay. Let's continue excelling and really capture that potential that everybody has.
And I think it's a snowball effect. I think you can see it in both ways, right? Like if you have a department that is unhealthy and negative and maybe not making the best choices, like that can snowball in that direction. And then if you have an agency that's like there's people in there that are leading by example and they're like, let's push, let's do it. They're inspiring other people to follow in their direction. And so that's that snowball in the positive. So I think it could go either way. But it sounds to me like, at least from your perspective, you're like, I'm going the positive direction. Like, let's go. And like, hopefully people will follow.
It is. It's not relying on, I hate the word motivation because it's so temporary. If you're waiting for motivation, conditions are going to be favorable. If you're waiting for motivation to happen, it's not. A lot of it is just accepting of where you're at in life and wanting to make that change through discipline and through accountability. And that's really where anybody will struggle, right? Is you want to start something, I'll start Monday. Well, why
Yeah.
not start now? Now is the best day. Motivation is very temporary. It's going to come. You're going to have that wonderful plan of action. You're going to want to do that. You get your macros dialed in. You're ready with MyFitnessPal, or you got everything prepared, and then motivation fizzes out, and before you know it, it's falling apart before you even started. Really, we try to act on discipline and try to instill that discipline and have goals that are attainable is really important because I think even for someone like me, you want to go full gas and achieve all these goals only to fail is sort of like relax, chill out a little bit, Let's create some sustainable goals. Let's start in the primitive level with your exercise routine. Let's sort of figure out what your routine is on a daily basis. A lot of folks that we interact with will say, I don't have time to do this because, I have to work, I have kids, I have a wife, I have priorities, I have to go to church. And a lot of it is just really scaling back, and less is always more. So it's really just breaking down your day and finding that 30 minutes to do that physical fitness routine, or having that morning where my success comes really for me is early in the morning, is my morning routine is what sets the trend for the rest of my day. And I found great success as far as my mood being better. I'm sort of being grounded, a little bit more patient is really starting with my morning. And that's what I really try to establish with the officers. Like, your day starts early, starts in the morning, start having your successes. I know there's a big analogy where the United States Navy general mentioned something about making your bed early in the morning, because if everything fails in life, at least you've made your bed and you've had that one success. And that's sort of where I kind of really capture my moment, is have success in the morning, wake up at the time you want to wake up, have your breakfast, get a morning routine. In my case, is just moving my body because I'm older, and getting the just that movement in place, getting my steps in place, already starting that movement. And it sort of lines up for the rest of the day. You start having small wins that compound on each other.
Yeah, I love that. And I was laughing to myself because I'm like, oh no, not that I don't have time
Yeah.
excuse, because I've done that too. I mean, trust me, I'm not innocent in this at all, but I think it goes back to what you said. It is prioritization of your time, and it's discipline. Everyone does have time. It's just how are you utilizing that time? And I think if everyone took a look at their day, like you said, break down your day, you'll start to see inefficiencies within your day and your schedule of like where you are maybe watching Netflix, and I'm not saying don't do that. Like, it's okay to watch a movie or watch Netflix, but maybe instead of watching 4 episodes, you watch three. Or, scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, it's like you blink and it's been 30 minutes to an hour and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything for 30 minutes to an hour except for consume other people's content and I didn't really do anything. So I think I love that of like break down your day, find spaces. But I agree with you about the morning. And one of the things that I have found to be really successful, and maybe this is advice that other people will take on to as well. I have meetings all day. I'm sure you do too, right? And it's like I have meetings starting at 6:30 in the morning and they typically go until 5:30 at night, every half hour, back to back to back to back. I actually had to start scheduling where like I have little 30-minute blocks where like I can eat, right? Or like whatever. So I don't have the time throughout the day. Um, but there's two things. One, I do have control over my schedule personally. But two, I do have time in the morning and I do have time at night. It's not that I don't have time. It's just that those times maybe aren't the most convenient times. And I thought to myself one day, I was like, you know what? I am never ever late and I never miss a meeting ever. I pride myself on showing up when I say I'm going to show up, being consistent. I'm on time always. And I do that for other people for respect of other people's time,
Mhm.
right? And so I thought to myself, well, if I make a meeting with myself, then I should have enough respect for me to show up on time and to never cancel, because I need to respect myself and my time as well. And that's important for me to do that. And so it's the prioritization of time. So now what I do is I actually schedule myself my own personal meetings. These are my meetings for my wellness for myself. And sometimes they are at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. And sometimes they are at 6 o'clock at night. And I don't miss a meeting ever. And so that's been helpful for me to break down my day and not say I don't have time. I do. I might be tired. It might not be the best workout ever. It might be like I have to drive in traffic or I have to like wake up when it's still dark, but I do have time and I'm going to make that meeting every day.
Same thing. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's essentially what I've done with my schedule, is break everything down. And you mentioned, cell phone usage. I think if anybody were to look at their phone times, they would easily find 30 minutes that they could go get a workout in, or go do your meal prep, or go read, or do something productive as far as growing on yourself. And that was a rude awakening for me, is looking at my phone time, be like, wow.
Yep.
that accumulates quick. And that's really what I sit down with individuals is to figure out, it's like, how do you get your mojo back? You know, it's basically identifying the life cycles that keep you stuck and eliminating those or identifying it, tailoring it, and creating that structured schedule where you're going to meet those obligations for yourself. And of course, those obligations that maybe your wife has put on your calendar, your family, your ball games. And you'll find that you have plenty of time for everything. We all have the same hours, but there's a lot of misuse of time because we do sit and absorb things. We live in the technology age where you have access to every show you want to watch and everything is on your telephone. So it's very easy to misuse your time. And I love that you mentioned that about your calendar because I'm kind of in the same boat as well as put it on the calendar. If it's on the calendar, it's going to happen for
Gonna
me.
happen. Yep,
Yep.
100%. And just one more note on kind of because I mean the cell phone use is addictive, right? Especially like the younger generation kind of growing up with that. One thing, if anyone's listening, that's been helpful for me is grayscale. Put grayscale on your phone and it's not as addictive. You actually don't really want to pick it up as much because it's not as like exciting. You don't get as much dopamine from it because it's all
Mhm.
like black and white. And so that's kind of helpful to, or just delete the app entirely, but that's a harder sell.
Yeah, I didn't
Than
delete it,
like
but mine are
grayscale.
like mine have a like mine prompts, it says you've used your allotted time on whatever particular app. Like if you're on Facebook, it's
Yeah,
a time limit for me. So it triggers it and then it shuts off the app for the remainder of the day.
I didn't know you could do
And that's
that.
just a setting on your telephone. I think even the phone companies are sort of or the manufacturers are providing mechanisms because they identify the addiction, especially with our kids, as far as cell
Interesting.
phone usage.
Interesting. I didn't know you can do that. I'm going to set that up after. Thank you for
Oh
teaching
yeah.
me something
Oh
new.
yeah. And I need that in my life. I need that structure. I need that balance. I need somebody to, or technology to tell me, hey, that's enough. Go do something else now.
Yep,
Um,
100%. I'm definitely going to implement that like right after this.
you
Not
know,
tomorrow,
even
today. I'm going to do that today.
a lot of us wear fitness watches. In my case, I love wearing my fitness watch because it tells me one, my physical activity, my step counts that I try to achieve. But it also just tells me to when to stand up because most of my work is either in meetings or in office, and I'm sitting down and my phone will ding. It's like, hey, buddy, it's time to stand up, go take a lap or something,
Yep.
disconnect from technology and go get some fresh air, some vitamin D, which
Yep.
is obviously very important. I think, as you probably know, most of us are deficient in it. Maybe not living in Arizona, but most of us are.
Yeah, we got a lot out here.
Yeah.
I wanted to just for one last thing for your agency, because I know that you have a lot of really cool aspirations. And so I want to know what's next. What are some of the things that you have on the horizon that you're trying to implement that are kind of out of the box? I know you told me some of them already, but I was hoping you would share.
So yeah, I mentioned that we got some personnel that are being trained, personal trainers, nutritionists. We're even learning about, they're even going to learn about, the new fad with the weight loss drugs. So I wanted to make sure that some folks that are considering that know some of the implications behind it. So we've been training on that. And I think that's pretty innovative as far as training your own personnel on that. That's a lot of investment on a person as far as getting these certifications that are way outside of what you essentially hired them for. But we have a great enthusiasm there as far as the folks being trained in that. Virginia's been pretty awesome. They've been turning the corner with wellness. Mental health has always been a great component where we have access to grants to capture that. But now they're trying tying mental healthness to financial and of course physical and offering grant opportunities. So many agencies here in Virginia have applied for wellness grants to sort of bring things into the department, whether you're trying to in our case, we're trying to create a room where officers can disconnect, where there's massage chairs, or they're not lazy boys, they're actually massage chairs that they can go and relax for a minute and sort of decompress. Maybe after a call that's impacted them, they can go there. Of course, creating that partnership with an external spiritual wellness organization that can come in and just really touch base with the officers, just see how they're doing, ask them how they are, and actually listen to what they're saying versus that mechanism where we send them to EAP to a person that's been assigned to them. It's more of a proactive approach where these folks come in and sort of just really create small talk with these officers and sort of find out what's, ticking in their brain and what's going on and how they can help. These programs will be in place as people get their certifications, of course. We're also trying to not train officers, but get them tested, get the male officers tested on the testosterone levels. I've read some statistics that our testosterone is way lower than we were in the 60s as a result of just the foods we're consuming. So I want these guys and girls to know where the testosterone levels are. I want them to have their blood checked. I want them to have to find out what their deficiencies are, nutritional, and what maybe foods that they're eating that sort of impact them the most. And they may not even know, man, I shouldn't be eating that. So we've gotten approved for those kind of blood tests. So hopefully we can follow up with you in a year's time and sort of tell you how we're progressing
Yeah.
with that wellness journey.
And I know that there's some things that you don't have yet, but some things that you've thought about that are really unique that I wanted to kind of shout out. I know that you had talked about float therapy, IVs, red light. Like I feel like the sky's the limit with you guys. Like you're really trying to figure out like what can we do and what's going to be, like we said before, effective, and how can we create a space of wellness within our
Yeah.
organization.
We have all these private businesses, businesses that offer red light therapy, IV therapy, cold plunging, and they all want to have partnerships with law enforcement. They all understand the intricacies and the challenges of law enforcement. So they're dying to have these partnerships. And it's just a matter of us communicating it, with them, creating those partnerships, and of course, making the officers understand the benefits of perhaps a cold plunge or perhaps red light therapy, IV therapy, which, as you know, has a wide variety of choices where you can do, whether it's just for hydration or for vitamin deficiencies. Hopefully, we can capture that. The language is in the works. I think we got approved. I think we got approved for some of those therapies, and I'm really excited to see how officers respond to that.
I'm curious to know what is your opinion on mobility? Because I want to say, like, the number one thing I get all the time when I'm working with law enforcement is like, I can't touch my toes. And we know
Mhm.
that one of the top reasons for injury in law enforcement is mobility. So, what is your perspective, or what are you seeing in the mobility space?
Absolute priority, huge is mobility work. From a young age, you work out so you can look good. And of course, you can go out and go to the beach and look great. But when you get into the professional business, especially in law enforcement, you see a lot of back injuries. You see a lot of injuries in general because we're not working out our core, we're not working out our mobility. And I'm just as much to blame as any other person for not working out those muscles that you actually don't see, is doing the stretching exercises before you work out, is establishing mobility and exercise programs that you are working out those core muscles, your glutes, your back, you sort of like anything that attributes, especially to your waistline, where officers really have problems with lower back issues or with their legs and knees is is educational, because a lot of us aren't taught that. You're taught your standards, work out your chest, your bis, tris, maybe work out legs. Some of us, when we're younger, we don't even do that because you just want the superficial muscles. But really for us is work out your mobility so you can have that strength in your back and your back muscles so you can sort of take on the weight of your gun belt or your duty belt and your vest, and your back can sort of take that beating from sitting down in a police car for hours and hours and then getting up. And we see a lot of that in law enforcement. I think a lot of folks would agree nationally that a lot of problems, a lot of the injuries, a lot of the workman's comp injuries are a result of folks not working out their core. Even something as far as yoga is huge. And a lot of officers, if you put them in yoga positions, there'll be some trouble.
I
There'll be a
know.
rude awakening is really what it would be of how much that is important and how much we lack that.
Yeah. And I have firsthand experience for sure in trying to get cops to do yoga or different mobility training. But there's an expression that I always try to teach. It's if you don't bend, you break. And
100%.
it's so true. And you have, and even in the context that you were talking about before, if you're going from cold to hot, you're going from sitting in your squad car and then you're all of a sudden you're on an on-foot pursuit and you're pulling a hamstring or something's happening because your muscles need to be prepared for
Mhm.
those types of movements. And if you're so tight that you can't move, the chances of you quote unquote breaking, or tearing something or having an injury is far greater. There's actually a lot of science and research to show that even incorporating 10 minutes of mobility training 3 times a week can reduce your risk of injury by like 50%, which is crazy. And so it's one of the first things I always say. It's like, can you just do 10 minutes? Can you do it
Yep.
like right before or right after you work out for 10 minutes? Because it's going to significantly reduce your risk of injury. And then I love that you said core. And it's not six pack. And we talked
No.
about this a little bit too. It's like there's stats that show you're more likely to be a millionaire than you are to have a six pack. And I don't know a lot of millionaires. So,
Yep.
it's not that. It's your deep abdominal muscles that support and protect your low back. And so, how can we have mobility and stability? Because you want both when it comes to injury prevention. So, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I think it's really important. It's something that's often missed.
And yep, and that will be one of the core functions in our physical wellness program is trying to get people to deviate. We still want you to work out your muscles, your chest, your buys, but is really going to functional strength training, is training your back, is training your glutes and your quads and some of the areas that really offer support to your body. So when you do have to go from 0 to 100, your body can withstand that. It's a challenge for us all. I have to force myself to do that and remind myself to work out these muscles. I'm the poster child for back injury at a very young age from the military on. It wasn't from a significant event. It was really just taking my spine and my back, my glutes for granted and not exercising it and just beating it up for years, where it finally attributed to problems with my back and sciatica problems, where I saw a chiropractor, and those were great. It was temporary fix, but it wasn't until I started stretching and started doing mobility work where I really saw improvement in my back. So it obviously works.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of us really capturing that and tailoring those programs for our law enforcement officers that they'll see great improvement. Because, like I said, I'm the poster child for a back injury. So I know if it can do it for me, it'll do it for most.
100%. Yeah, I love that. I think that's great.
Mhm.
I have one final question for you. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way?
Start taking care of yourself. Always take care of number one, because if you're not taking care of number one, other things will falter. Always get dialed in with yourself, whether it's your spiritual wellness, your physical wellness. We're exceptional in the academy setting to create that standard, and then things start to fall apart as we get into our careers, our priorities change. It's really important for officers to stay grounded with the basics, is creating that stability in your physical fitness, is understanding that people are going to gift us donuts and lots of nice foods, but considering maybe you shouldn't eat that every single day, understanding the job intricacies that are going to be imposed, it's going to create, mental health issues. So you have to be able to talk to folks and understand that a lot of these things can create poor physical health, financial strain, can create broken relationships. So we have to address those causes and identify those symptoms.
Thank you. Thank you, Chitram. I,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time so much. I have loved this conversation. I really, really do appreciate you spending the last hour with me. That's all I have for you, but I want to give you the floor if there's anything else that I missed.
No, thank you for allowing me to be on the podcast. Hopefully we can do a follow-up as far as, where we're at a year from now with our wellness journey and sort of like a feedback from the officers. That way we can sort of share that on your podcast. But I really enjoyed the time here. A lot of it is just really having good attitude and creating these policies and being a part of it because, with good attitude comes high altitude. So hopefully we will hit home runs here.
Well, I would love to do a part two, and I love that good attitude creates high altitude. Is
Yeah.
that what you said? I wrote that down.
Yes.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. And yeah, let's stay in touch and we'll do a part two in the future.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.